There's that on top of the world winning feeling and the gut-stabbing pain of losing. Now more than ever, athletes struggle with their mental health due to the pressure, environments, relationships, and anxiety they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
When you see things like that, you start to believe it.
Sometimes calls from the media.
And you lose yourself in it. And I never thought that I would be at such a low point.
But at the end of the day, you truly never know what someone's going through.
Who do I want to win a
Sometimes
championship?
after defeat.
I just feel like I failed.
Sometimes from their coaching environment.
You guys been raised that you're so weak mentally that you just
or NIL deals.
An NIL deal in front of you or an offer in front of you, and they are pressuring you to make a decision quick. Hey, you need to make a decision right now. You can't leave the room, you can't leave the office, you can't talk to your parents, your coach, your advisors, or anything. That is an absurd red flag. Does this deal, does this brand, does this company, does it help who I'm becoming, what I'm aiming for, who I'm trying to be in the future?
Headlines now talk about college athletes' anxiety, depression, and struggle to find purpose outside of their sport. With all of these experiences and emotions, it can become overwhelming for athletes, sometimes being unbearable. Sometimes athletes might even hit a breaking point. This is where sports psychology comes in. It focuses on understanding athletes' behaviors and mental processes, applying established psychological principles to help them strengthen their mindset, enhance performance, and gain a competitive edge. I am really excited to be diving into this question and engaging conversations about mental health, as I have had my own experience dealing with anxiety in sports and working with a sports psychologist. Sports psychologists help athletes address their anxiety, burnout, and confidence through a variety of techniques and theories. This ultimately helps and improves athletes' mental health. Some examples of the outcomes of working with sports psychologists could be faster recovery from mistakes, better focus, maintaining peak performance levels, better win and loss records, and improved personal stats. While the recent talks of mental health has increased the popularity of sports psychology, it wasn't always like this. Mental health was not talked about or treated the same back then. The first sports psychology journal wasn't even published until the 70s. How did college athletes go decades without having someone who understood what they were going through, and more importantly, why? How did they go about processing their emotions while still being expected to perform? When theories were introduced, how were they perceived by athletes and coaches? That brings me to an important question. How did the field of sports psychology affect college athletics throughout the 1900s?
The history of college sports and sports psychology's influence started all the way back in the 1800s during muscular Christianity. In the 1800s, Christianity lost its appeal with men, and people wanted to bring others back to the church by saying religion was for men and encourage physical activity. People would play indoor games and sports for this. College sports first picked up with the first official game on November 6, 1869, when Rutgers met Princeton. In 1876, Yale's captain Eugene Baker started to emphasize winning. He said, for his team, all in college who can play at all to join our afternoon practices, especially the larger and heavier men. Let there be no holding back. Banquets, speeches, this was all at the door, and now the game is about winning. They had agreed they wanted a champion. During the same time, Norman Triplett had a breakthrough theory, one of the first theories of sports psychology, that human performances aren't just physical. In 1898, he had held an experiment having to do with pacemaking and competition. He defined pacemaking as the presence of another person performing the same task at the same time. This creates a sense of competition or comparison, even without direct interaction. Many participants perform faster when working alongside others than when alone. His concluding statement was, from the above facts regarding the laboratory races, we infer that the bodily presence of another contestant participating simultaneously in the race serves to liberate vital energy not ordinarily available. He essentially is saying that human performances in races isn't just physical. Psychological influences like seeing competitors move quickly, encouragement, and mental states can significantly increase or decrease performance. In 1904, D. Stanley Hall came up with a theory about storm and stress. Storm refers to a decreased level of self-control, whereas stress refers to an increased level of sensitivity. The storm and stress theory suggests that during adolescence, roughly ages 10 to 18, people go through a universal, inevitable period of emotional turmoil, conflict, and risk-taking. The end of the adolescence period is when people would go on to go to college and engage in organized sports. In 1905, newspapers and prints start to emerge sports writers who followed athletes like celebrities to help create and foster fan bases for these teams, growing the popularity of sports. Enter Fielding Yost in one of his point-and-minute teams. A standout player was Denny Clark. The 1905 Michigan team at the time had outscored opponents 495-0 in its first 12 games. They played Chicago, and the game was lost in the final 10 minutes of play when Denny Clark was tackled for safety as he attempted to return a punt from behind the goal line. Now, fully 20 years after the game, Fielding Yost wanted to talk to him about just how he was doing in his future, but Clark kept turning to the conversation back to the big game in 1905, where he lost the game for the team. Yost, sounding personally hurt by the despair he witnessed, seeing his former player, he wrote that only Dennis still feels the pain of it. Denny ended up committing suicide and noted that he was still haunted by his mistake that game. He was never able to get over it. The media could be a potential reason why he was never able to get over it. He essentially had become famous for making a terrible mistake. In 1906, we start to see key players in football emerge like Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Harvard, Yale, Chicago, and Penn. They were very influential teams, much talked about in the media, and had large fan bases. With this, rule changes started to occur, and Harvard was taking the lead. Because of Harvard's proposed rule changes, they established the ICAA, which stood for the Intercollegiate Athletic Association. And a couple years later, the NCAA was established. About a decade later, the world takes a turn and war and disease break out. In 1919, enter Chick Harley. He was widely known for his credible football ability as Ohio State QB. During a game in the 1919 season against Illinois, with 8 seconds left remaining, Illinois QB Bob Fletcher connected and successfully completed his first ever field goal attempt to shock OSU with a 9-7 defeat. This was Harley's only defeat at OSU. His teammates described talking to Chick after they lost his final game. They couldn't get him out of the dressing room until midnight because he was crying and thought he had let them down. A win might have gave OSU their first ever national championship. Harley went on to become a coach and played professionally for the Chicago Bears. He did well early on, but had a broken ribs and his game and mental state started to fall apart. His anxiety grew, he became moody and began to withdraw. He was a sub for the first time in his life and he didn't know how to handle it. He thought everyone was against him. Something was wrong. He was diagnosed with what is now known as schizophrenia. Harley spent much of his life under care, and Ohio State even honored him by hiring him as an assistant coach to help cover his medical expenses. He could simply never get over the fact that he had lost that game, he was a sub, and was going through a lot mentally and just didn't have the resources to handle it. Instead, the 1930s entered the Great Depression. We see news, reels, and films peaking during this time. People would go to movie theaters to watch football games, and it only skyrocketed the popularity that college football had. In 1935, Herman Griffin established the first sports psychology laboratory in North America. It was at the University of Illinois, and it was established as a sports psychology lab called the Research and Athletics Laboratory. It was established to study the performance of athletes from a psychological perspective. We study the links between personality and physiology on athletic success. In 1936, Moses Sheriff publishes The Psychology of Social Norms. He helped develop social judgment theory and realistic conflict theory. Sheriff was the founder of the modern psychology, who developed several unique and powerful techniques for understanding social processes, particularly the social norms and social conflict. He states of a group of people experiencing more or less the same stress in facing the same grave situation. This relates directly to teams, as they have to work through issues and overcome battles to be able to win a game and work as a team, fostering and creating a culture that allows them all to have psychological safety to trust each other. In the 1940s, World War II happens. Now we have the GI Bill enter as soldiers to go back to school after the war. In 1943, the original underlying drive reduction framework was created by Kiera Hall, and it shows a linear relationship between arousal and performance, but there are some limitations to this simplistic approach. Individual differences, such as personality traits and cognitive abilities, also affect how athletes respond to stressors affecting their performances. Drive theory suggests that increased arousal or anxiety boosts the likelihood of performing dominant responses. And previous theories, like one that was presented in 908, actually contradict this. The inverted U theory contradicts this by stating that optimal sports performance occurs at moderate arousal levels rather than maximum levels. Because of the conflicting theory, a more comprehensive theory is needed in sports psychology at this time that considers different types of stress and their impact on athletes and individual factors beyond just arousal levels. In the 1950s, lots is going on in the war affecting athletes in college campuses across the U.S. The Cold War is happening overseas, and the civil rights movement is happening in the U.S. Television and media rights also come into play. The fear created by television became the catalyst in the transformation of the NCAA into the most dominant force in college athletics. In 1963, David McLeland started the achievement motivation theory, the NEAT theory. This theory had three different pillars. He stated that every individual, irrespective of their gender, age, and culture, is driven by only three types of needs. In addition, he stated one of the three needs dominates the other two, and the dominating needs will be influenced by one's culture and lifestyle. The first being the need for power. People who like to have power in a hand or like to be in charge in order to dominate or influence others are included under this category. Second is the need for achievement. The people included under this category are often motivated by the need to achieve their goals in life. Lastly is the need for affiliation. People under this category love to affiliate and always want to stay in groups and value society and relationships over everything else. In 1965, a big breakthrough happened by the establishment of the International Society of Sports Psychology. This began the discussion between cognitive scientists from the West and East. With this, in 1970, the International Journal of Sports Psychology was established by Riccio Antonelli. It served as the first major international publication for researchers to publish their work, marking a key development in the academic field. In 1974, another big breakthrough happened when W. Timothy Gallwey published The Inner Game. The book introduces the concept of the inner game, which is a mental battle against self-doubt and nervousness that hinders performance separate from the outer game of playing against an opponent. There are two different kinds of self. One is the conscious mind, and two is the unconscious mind. Players sometimes talk to themselves to connect self one and self two and interact to determine their success. Coaches come in to help their players balance the two selves. However, telling players what to do and what to avoid doesn't always work. The more players consciously focus on what they are told, the less successful they might become. Coaches have to teach players how to operate both selves independently without interference from the other to get the best possible chance of success. We don't see sports psychologists added to athletic department staff until the 1980s and 90s. Sports psychologists are an essential piece of the puzzle creating successful teams. We will now hear from mental performance coach Kevin Grammas, started his own company, Target Mentality, to work specifically with athletes on how to improve their game from the inside out. I personally worked with Kevin and saw major improvements in my physical game by starting with my inner game.
Why is it so important to engage in conversations about mental health from your perspective?
Well, athletes are human beings and we have to treat them that way. They're not just human doings. And part of part of the engagement is with that communication is building relationships. And if you value the person over the player and not just what they do, I think that's going to make them a, a better player on the field. And if we understand any of their background, whether it's pressure that they're facing or stress that they're having, not just telling them, oh, push through, push through, push through, but listen and then give them strategies. One, it's going to help the relationship. And two, it's going to help their performance on the field if they're not fearing failure, fearing judgment, and just being able to compete with a clear, confident mind. Compete.
Definitely. Awesome. The next question I wanted to ask you was, how do you see like mental performance in athletes affecting their recruiting experience and retention in NCAA programs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think these schools that invest in the mental health may attract athletes that they're promoting a strong culture. It's not a culture based on fear. They're giving athletes a system and an accountability partner. And athletes are realizing, hey, they're not just training my physical skills, they're training mental skills, maybe some time management and organization, self control and discipline, training an elite mindset. And these programs are being proactive and not reactive for athletes coming in, and I think that would build those. Again, it goes back to the relationships, and when you have those relationships, it's probably a greater chance that athletes stick around as opposed to leaving for whatever reason, whether it's playing time or NIL money.
Hmm. Definitely. I mean, as we know, like not all college athletes go on to play professional. It's a very, very small percentage. And I think the difference between college athletes going pro and, just stepping out into the real world of like what life is without their sport after all that pressure and training, go, go, go all the time is difficult to experience. So when you have a program that supports you and not just your athletic ability is really, really important.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the skills that they're learning, and whether it's D1, NAIA, within that athletic framework, they're able to transfer to not only their jobs, but their life.
Mhm. Type of thing.
Yeah, that's a really good question too. I think it goes back to just being in alignment and not just one or the other, and
Mm-hmm.
keeping everything in alignment and having just those high standards. And within a team, just having psychological safety. I think Microsoft did that project, Aristotle project, and they found that some of the best teams are those that are in a safe psychological space. There's a lot of safety within their group. And when you have that safety, you're able to handle the stress or pressure a little bit better, and there's more of a life balance. So I don't know if it's an either or, but it's all in alignment of what you do, and having an identity kind of, this is me on the court or field or in the pool or on the track. And then after that, when you walk away, you could flip that switch off and you can go back to being who you are as a person. And then when your routine calls for it, you flip that switch back on the next day, and then you're back into that process. So just being in alignment with who you are and the standards that you set.
Overall, sports psychology has evolved greatly throughout the 1900s with many thanks to these key figures. Today, the inner game has been spread to be applied specifically to a few more sports and has become widely known and accepted that athletes must use resources, like coaches, to teach them how to have both selves operate independently without interference from the other. One last note is that it is okay to ask for help. It's okay to be struggling. Athletes are more than their sports. Support, resources, and help is out there if you need to talk to someone. You are never alone.